Wow, since I've been up here. Everybody. How you doing, sir? Been a while, Ethan. Yeah. Go ahead. I don't have any statements to make, even though I'd like to make one, but I'm not going to. No, I don't want to make a statement. It's not right now.
Does it involve an 8-foot or 10-foot pole?
Could? No.
Okay. I'll start with the softball.
You got it.
Over the years, you and Mickey have said when you believed your team was within contention, you were willing to spend into the luxury tax. Clearly, going 14 on a standard roster, staying below the tax was done intentionally. What's the thought there of tax versus contention? Thank you.
I think you have to prove, first that you're the kind of team that can play at that level, and then you can make that investment. So obviously, we're a team that has paid the tax. We're a team that always believes in that we're going to compete and we're going to win. And the season isn't over with yet, Ivor. So, we can jump in there if we have to. If something happens, that's going to make us better. But right now, I think we have a team, and playing up to the tax, it's never been a mandate, but it's been always on my mind. I'm not going to just say, okay, every year we're going to go into the tax and then, we don't win and, Mickey's writing these big checks. I don't think that's fair. But when we have a real contender, which I think we have, we'll entertain that, and I think we'll entertain it this year too.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Pat. With Bam, so much of the talk was developing a three-point shot this offseason, but it seems like he's become even more efficient around the basket. What improvements have you seen from him offensively during training camp and during the preseason?
He's gotten extraordinarily, not just a little bit, he's gotten extraordinarily better than last year, and I think across the board in how Eric wants to use him. And so he's gotten more confidence. A lot of the things that he did last year that may have been exploited, I don't think they were exploited from an individual standpoint or a lack thereof of having certain individual skills. It's what he not was allowed to do, but what he sort of decided that he was going to do during the course of the game, and how he either ran the offense, instituted, play sets, being a primary ball handler and stuff like that. There was a time last year where there was an in-between and in betwixt, on him making decisions based on being a ball handler or a shooter. I think you might see just a flat-out score this year with the ability to be able to make plays. So it isn't getting permission from your head coach. It's having the offense sort of evolve in a way that the offense gives you permission to play. And what I've watched with KC, I think they call it KC, Kyle Chaos, it's going to be an interesting time out there. That ball's going to be flying all over the place. But I think Bam is essential, and, just sort of maybe to expound a little bit on Bam, having Jimmy and having Kyle, those two players in particular are great basketball players, but also playmakers, scorers, very smart defenders, the whole thing. I think one of the great keys to this team is the development of Bam and Tyler and Duncan, and Max. These guys in particular, the guys that we brought in, P.J. Tucker and Markeith and Dwayne Dedman, even Gabe. It's going to take, consistent production night in and night out from these guys. And it ain't going to be on Jimmy and Kyle and Bam to score all the points. I think a lot of it might come from the other guys. And I think it's going to be a challenging year because of our schedule and how we start. A big part of it's going to start with Bam, but I think our younger guys are going to play a big role in really supporting the efforts of Jimmy and Kyle.
Hi, Pat. Ruth Polinsky with NBC6.
Yes, how are you?
Hi, good. Kind of an overarching, generic question for me, but I guess I asked some of the guys this yesterday. did anything surprise you about what you were able to see in the makeup of the team over the course of the preseason and training camp? And then I guess just a second part of that question is, after all these years, just what excites you about a new season?
Well, what I just saw excites me. In getting back, I think as a human being, as we all have, back to almost normal. We still have, to worry about this pandemic that we're in and dealing with all of those things that we dealt with differently last year. But the preseason was a successful preseason. I've always been somebody who wanted to be undefeated in the preseason. I didn't care about, I would never give a game away. It's just my mentality that winning creates confidence. And when you put pressure on players to really be in great shape, and then you put some pressure on them to say, hey, you want to play, you got to perform. So performing with pressure, on them, especially when they say they can do it, and give me an opportunity, coach, give me an opportunity. I think Eric has given these guys, tremendous opportunities in preseason, and we saw what Tyler could do, in a string of games, and what Bam can do in a string of games. Max Strus, his agent is on the phone all the time trying to, call and extend his contract or whatever. You made a game winner. But all of these guys that, Chet and Adam and Eric Amsler, that they have either recommended to be drafted, or, we found them, somewhere, after the draft or in free agency, have really developed, I think, into very good players. And so I'm excited to see how it all works. I'm not excited about, 7 of our first 20, being at home and 13 on the road. And 12 out of 36, I think. I could be wrong. 12 out of 24 on the road. So we have a very challenging start. So conditioning is going to be very important. Efficiency is going to be important. And last year we started 7-14 and got ourselves into a hole, but that was COVID related more than anything else, in quarantining. So we have to somehow get off to a good start with this challenging schedule.
Pat, when you brought Tim Hardaway here, I think 1996, I guess it would be, he kind of changed the whole dynamic.
Yes.
In terms of being a point guard.
Excuse me.
We're 25 years later, and Kyle comes in here. Do you see any similarities in terms of veteran point guards who've kind of done it, been other places, had some winning experience, in terms of what Kyle can provide for this roster to what Tim did?
Yes, without a doubt. Zoe, first in the trade, and then Tim in the trade at the trading deadline to get both of those guys that first year with our roster, and then be able to build our roster around them, gave us a very compelling start in the late 90s. It didn't always end up, the way you wanted it to, but they were pretty compelling, playoff series. And Tim was that kind of player. I remember after we went down 3-1, and then there was that little skirmish between PJ and Charlie Ward, I think it was, or Chris Childs, and then we were playing Game 7 here, and he had 38 or 39 in the game. I think, I could be wrong, it could have been one of the other deciding games, but Tim had the big game mentality. He was tough-minded. He was a great leader. He got himself in world-class shape. He was all NBA first team the next season. So we were very fortunate to get both Zoe and Tim to get off to a good start, and to be able to get a guy like Kyle, 15 years in, and you get his brain to go with his body. And he's very unselfish. There are going to be nights when he's going to need to score a little bit more, and then there's going to be nights when he's just going to distribute. And because we do have a lot of shooters and we have some other scorers, that might not be needed, but it doesn't make any difference to him nor to me or Eric. As long as we're winning, a good percentage of our games, I think whatever Kyle does is going to be a plus. Yeah.
Pat, what were the conversations like with Tyler going into the summer about the improvements you want him to make, and then what have you thought about the physical improvements that he seems like he's come back with?
I don't think I talked to Tyler once all summer. You know, I mean, it was a short summer. I'm only kidding you. I did probably speak with him and his agent, you know, but, you know, there comes a time in a young player's career when there's enough talk. I mean, after a while, they get a little bit, you know, adviced out. You give them more advice. You got to do this. You can't do this. Watch that. You know, more, you need more running. You need more this. I mean, he has been taught by his coaches, you know, everything he needs to know, and he studied, you know, very hard, and he works, you know, hard at it. You know, what Eric says about him is not, you know, untrue. I mean, he is a workaholic in trying to refine his game. So I think the only thing that I would try to recommend to young players, and you have to sort of walk a fine line with this too, is that the world has changed in such a way where you can't, your voice can't just dominate the locker room anymore, and with certain things that you want, you know, players to do. Social media is something that, and I say it in a positive context, that really helped a lot of young players to learn a lot more about this world, not just what they learn on the court. It also gives them an opportunity to have what they call this platform, and obviously the NBA is a great platform to be able to express what they want, show what they want, show their game on YouTube if they want, what they're doing, and also whatever they're selling from a brand. So we support all of that. But I think one thing you don't want to do as a young player or as a team is don't ever tell anybody what you're going to do before you do it. That's one thing you don't want to do, because you want to put a big bullseye on your back, then go ahead and go out there. And so, you know, young guys that are confident and brash and, okay, you know, don't sleep on me. Well, okay, they're going to come after you. I think he sort of relishes that a little bit. So if I were to give him any kind of advice, or any young players, to say, you know, go out there and show it, go out there and prove it, and I think he will.
Coach, over here.
Yeah.
It's been 19 months since we've seen the building out here at full capacity for a game. I mean, we got a little taste of it in playoffs.
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll be back for the regular season. 2 questions. How excited are you to see our fan base back here in person at FTX, and how do you see that just affecting the game in general? This is something different than we did the last year during the pandemic, now having fans back.
Well, just to get back into the arena last year, even without the fans, you know, that was the first step. Obviously, it was bizarre and it was strange to be watching basketball games and very few people around. The playoffs, it was very heartening to see our fans back, excited. The series was awful. We got our heads handed to us. I don't think one player played, you know, at their level, which they're capable of, and Milwaukee was just so dominant. So left a bad taste, I'm sure, in our fans' mouth after all that time. But, you know, I think right now with this team, and I think with the anticipation of what the fans might think this team can do, I'm excited to see, you know, this a great crowd out there, and it's a different crowd. And I've been here 26 years. And so, you know, a lot of the people that were watching me, you know, in the American Airlines Arena, in the Miami Arena, that is now FTX here, but have changed. You know, it's not the same fan base. Those people are 26 years older. These are younger people, excited. The younger they're more gifted in how they present themselves, and you see it in football and baseball. You see it in basketball. So I think what we do in the marketing department and how we promote our games, but I just believe that, you know, the fans that are going to be coming out to watch us are going to be very excited to get started. Yes.
At one of the downsides or difficult sides when you have a lot of high-end salaries is filling out the roster, sometimes at minimums or mid-levels, things like that. Last year, clearly, it did not work out. COVID, injuries, other things with Mo and with Avery. You've issued statements on the player signings, but if we could just get your thoughts on Do you believe with the additions of Markeith and re-signing Dwayne Dedmon and Kyle Lowry, not Kyle Lowry, PJ Tucker relatively on the lower end, you're able to sort of fill in behind Jimmy and Bam and Kyle what you need?
Yes. Excuse me. One of the keys to Jimmy's first year, okay, and when we went into the bubble, was the trade that we made for Andre and for Solomon Hill. From that standpoint, being able to get Jay Crowder, those three guys, really sort of helped us in the middle of the season. And then all of a sudden we made that trade, and then on March the 13th or whatever it was, they shut the season down. I never even got to say hello to any of those guys, hardly even talked to them, and then they went into the bubble. So when you can pick up, players like PJ, Markeith, and Kyle, really savvy veteran players that are talented, and put them in this kind of situation where they're, I think, motivated. I think we did the right thing. It reminds me a little bit of what we did with Shaquille and Dwayne in 2006. When we lost in the sixth game to Detroit in Shaq's first year, and I felt that we needed a little bit more medieval, type of mentalities. Guys that have shields and swords and axes and stuff. I've been watching Netflix and Tudors and The Last Kingdom and all that stuff, right? So I can use that as an analogy, but. And I think when we got Peyton, Gary, and we got Jay Will, and we got James Posey and Antoine Walker, whether people received that well or not, I think they really helped us, their experience. And it gave us a real solid 8 with UD and with Dwayne, with Shaquille, and also UD, Dwayne, Shaquille, and those three guys, I think, basically, and as our starters. Three guys coming back. But bringing those four guys in, I think, really helped us.
Jimmy went into the Buck series with plenty of bravado, saying he's sort of at the top of his game, and it clearly was not the best of Jimmy. What do you see from players who have moments like that when they come back the next season? I know sometimes it could beat a player down, that they came up short. Other time it motivates. In your discussions with Jimmy and what you've seen on the practice court, how do you think that impacted Jimmy?
He wasn't happy, obviously, with losing and getting swept and being embarrassed. They had a great game plan for him as far as putting size on Jimmy and in timely double teams, but constantly having Middleton or Giannis or Holiday or whoever or PJ. They had some defenders that could change up his game. So look, he's a student of the game. He knows what he can do, and he'll go back and look at that, not just for the home opener, but hopefully that he'll respond in a way that is a lot different than what happened in that series. He knew he was not that good, wasn't that efficient. I think there were only 2 games, Ira, that we were actually in. We could have won the first game, and on Duncan's jumper, and then we were in it here, but they were just too big for us. They were big, and they played really big and quick. So we didn't make the adjustment to that.
Can I just follow that up for a second? Yeah. When you said they were too big, and there's been a talking point down here for a while about whether you and Eric have talked about going big. We saw in the era of Hassan and Bam, coach decided to go in a different direction. You had mentioned after that offseason, that's something you might discuss. Yeah. You have the ability now, with Dwayne being here for more than a month, with Bam obviously able to play big, maybe with Omer at some point also. Your thoughts in today's NBA, which is a lot different to a degree than when you coach, but as far as, one, can this Miami Heat team play big? 2, should this Miami Heat team at least consider playing big? Thank you.
They have to play every way that they can to win games. And if some nights the speed game or positionless, game, going down with Bam as your primary big and with a lot of perimeter players can be very successful. But I don't think, other than Milwaukee, when you talk about Middleton at 6'9" or 6'10", and Giannis at 7 feet, and Lopez at 7'1", they are definitely a big team, just from that standpoint, and they happen to be very talented. And I don't think there are many teams that are like that and that versatile. So a lot of times somebody can go big and you can still be small and beat big. But there are times when I do believe now with Bam and with Dwayne, whether it's Omer, even Markieff and Bam together, that we can play a little bit with a little bit more size. But again, Spo's very aware of that. It's something that I think as the season goes along, he'll make those those kinds of adjustments.
Pat, you made a decision to retain Duncan Robinson. Where do you want to see his game grow? And one thing he has said is he'd like the opportunity to sort of play his way into being a closer this season, which is not something he's always done here. What needs to happen for that to happen for him?
Well, he's got to be on a bad team. Then he'll definitely be on the court at the end of the game because he'd be one of the best players. I say that in jest, is that it's very hard when you have very skilled players that might not be two-way players. The biggest improvement that I saw in Tyler in the preseason and also with Duncan, you can lift some weights, you can gain 10 pounds of muscle, but it still doesn't mean you can be a great defender. But it gives you a chance to challenge, physicality in a different manner. And so they know now, I think with Spo, that if you want to be on the court at the end of the game, somewhere you got to show during the course of the game or during the course of the season that, my defense is not going to hurt me in the last, 4 or 5 minutes. And so I don't think, Spo really thinks about, I'm not going to play Duncan or I'm not going to play this guy because they can't guard. I think he's going to go with the best 5 players. And, Tyler's probably going to be on the court because he's a multifaceted offensive player who can defend, he can handle the ball. And, Duncan has become one of 10 or 12 guys in this league that has changed the game, the evolution of the game. I mean, back in the 2000s, the first couple of years of this turn of the century, you get a 15 to 23, he's fine. They come out of your offense. We always used to teach, it touches inside and comes out, take it. But now you're putting up 53s or 43s, and guys like, Duncan Robinson and, Joe Harris and Bertans and Tyler and Max, they create a skill set that you really need in today's game because they have the nerve to put up 35-footers without any consequences. Without any consequences, a 35-footer, And it might even be an air ball, and somebody give him a high five or something like that. But you need players like Duncan. He's valuable. He was paid as not just a floor spacer, but a guy's going to make shots. And I think you'll see a guy make, he might miss 3 or 4, and then he hits 4 in a row. But right now, the three-point shot has to be really dealt with on both ends of the court. How are you going to defend it? And then you better have 3 or 4 guys that can make them when it counts. Yeah, so he's a valuable player. So he's got a tough decision at the end there,
Pat, with PJ, just with what he meant to that Bucks team last year, how surprised were you guys that you guys were able to sign him away from Milwaukee? And is there a feeling, I know they're different players, but is there a feeling he can offer you guys what kind of the role Jay played, a few years ago?
Yes. Yeah, he can play, that role. I don't think there's any doubt. I do think teams get caught between a rock and a hard place, when they make trades for guys at midseason that become unrestricted, and then they're dealing with the tax, and they can't probably even sign them. And so I think PJ, was one of those guys that fortunately we could talk to that wanted to come here, and we could pay a portion of the mid-level to. So he's 3 times more than what I thought he was. He just is. I mean, if I wanted to put on a defensive clinic, I would use him as an example on how to close out, how to get in a stance, how to slide your feet, how to stay in a play when you're beat, how to get over a pick, how to communicate and talk. These are just on the defensive end. And how to blitz switch, those kinds of things. And then on the offensive end, he's like a heat-seeking missile as a screener to try to get Duncan and Tyler open. He's one of the most unselfish players that I've ever been around from that context. He just wants to win. He's going to do what he can do to help to win. But from a defensive standpoint, playing guys, he can play big guys, play small guys, he can play post-up guys. He's really a complete defender. And so I've learned a lot more about him, since I've been watching him in training camp. And he's definitely not a one-dimensional defender.
All right, we'll go back to Zoom with Dave Hyde. Let's try to give this another shot. Go ahead.
All right, Pat.
Hey, Dave.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, how you doing?
Good.
Great. So you've touched on sort of walk through the history of how you built the Heat. So let's go all the way back. 67, your first opener, San Diego Rockets and St. Louis Hawks.
What was my line in that game, Dave?
Actually, I got it. 10 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. Although I do have to point out 2 of 6 on foul shots.
Yeah, I found out back in 1967, my first training camp, when I came from Kentucky. Jack McMahon was the general manager and head coach of the San Diego Rockets. He drafted me he saw me because he was in Cincinnati at the time. But I remember telling me this story that when I got to San Diego and was working out in the summertime to try to get ready for training camp and the pros, he looked very concerned about his number 1 draft pick. I think I was the 8th pick in the draft that year or something. Jimmy Walker, Clyde Frazier, Earl Monroe, all these other players were picked ahead of me, and truly significant, great players. I did not turn out to be one of those guys. But we had our first scrimmage in training camp. I was playing against a guy by the name of John Barnhill, and he was a little guard, tough, about 6'2", pick you up full court. I couldn't get the ball across half court because I couldn't do anything but dribble with my right hand. So, Coach McMahon pulled me out, took me over to the side, and he said, "That's the worst 5 minutes of basketball that I have ever seen, Pat. You're going to have to get your thing together. I'm going to be out of here soon." So, but it was quite an experience, Dave. If you think about, I've been around 6 generations. I've gone through sort of 6 generations, but I'll never forget. Now you're bringing back great memories about San Diego, and that's where I met Chris and friends, and didn't know anything. It's where I used to get 8-track tapes, from my records to 8-track tapes. I used to put them in my Corvette. I remember the first song that I played Chris in the Corvette that I bought with my bonus money was by the Intruders, "Cowboys to Girls." That was the song, and she throws up every time I play it now. So, but thank you for bringing back the memory. It was a.
Yeah, sure. I'm just curious. The opener, the feel of an opener now that you've had 54 of them. What's that like?
Well, it's always, it really is. It's always something of excitement to you. You look forward to it. When you're a basketball junkie and it's your life and you've decided to make it your life, that you have a wonderful summer. This is a great career for anybody who's in it. It's hard. Even for all of the writers, and the people that cover the sport for 100 games a year and are on the road and are coming back. It's a grind for everybody. And even more so now, I think, for all the journalists, because they have to get out 2-3 stories, I think, and then they got podcasts and they got whatever. I used to be able to pick up the paper and there, Ira or whoever it was, or would at the time, who were some of the writers earlier in the career? Oh, God, yeah. And read the story, and that would be it. Nobody would be taking any kind of thing out of it and putting it on social media and then taking it out of context, So it's a grind and, for everybody, from that standpoint. But when you have the summer off and you can think about, what's coming, is that another season is coming, and you get excited about it. So I'm an active participant in that kind of excitement.
All right, next we'll go to Wes Goldberg.
Hey, can we hear me?
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. You mentioned the team needing to show that it could be potentially a contender before making that decision of whether or not to spend into the tax. Can that evaluation be made before Victor Oladipo returns, and how do you view his potential impact on this group?
The whole concept with the tax is that you're either in or you're not. I mean, if you want to win and you think you can win and you can make a transaction that takes you over, I don't think, Mickey is going to say no to that if he thinks this player can help us. So, that aside, you really don't know when that's going to happen, prior to the trading deadline or maybe some kind of buyout that's going to take you into it. It wouldn't take us into it very significantly. It would cost us a lot. Because this is also an income-producing league, that the amount of tax that's going to be paid out by a lot of the tax holders, the taxpayers, is significant, to the non-taxpayers. So, in order to give up that kind of revenue, you better make sure that if you're going to go in, you're just not going to go in and, not make the playoffs, or you're not going to, get through the first round or something. But we've talked a lot about it, and we'd be ready to make a move if we have to. But let's get through the first 20 games. Let's say see where we are in the first 20 games, and because it's going to be challenging just from the start with our schedule.
All right, next we'll go to John Crotty.
Hey, Coach, how you doing?
I'm good, John. I'm good. Get back on defense. Come on. Let's go.
Never had to
Share
worry
the
about
ball a
that,
little bit. Now, you talk about Tim Hardaway. These two guys used to have some rivalries, let me tell you, in practice. Those were good days. Yeah, John could play. Besides sell real estate, he's probably a better player.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah.
Look, you were talking a little bit earlier on the evolution of the game and what you've seen, and it's just been amazing to me with a guy like yourself who's coached some of the most dominant post players to see how things have changed, the floor being stretched with the three-point shot. Have you been surprised sort of how rapidly that's taken over? And then I guess to kind of add on to that is, how much is the analytics, and that piece come into, your personnel decisions, along with the eye test and that balance there when you're making some of those decisions? Thanks, Coach.
If I could get a big man every year that could really play, the Joel Embiid type of big men, he's an exceptional player as a center. There's not many, true centers, back to the basket centers, and also guys that can play on the perimeter, Jokic, those kinds of guys. But I would always be a believer in trying to have a great big man than a plethora of playmakers and shooters, and I do think he'd probably win a lot of titles if he could get that, but it's hard to find that. And you're right, the game has changed dramatically, evolved to a run and gun, 3-point shooting game. But if you do have a big, with playmakers and also shooters, then I think you pretty much balance the floor from that standpoint. So we're right now playing with Bam, who's a versatile, player who can do a lot of different things. We have a tendency to play down, but we do have some big guys, but we don't have the real dominant big guy that really isn't around that much anymore. And quite frankly, I don't know if they teach in college basketball how to play like Kareem played, or Shaq, or Wilt, or or Hakeem, or Patrick Ewing, or Zoe, or any of those players. It's all changed because they've asked them to do different things.
All right, next we'll go to David Lang.
Hey, Coach. Bam said that the team calls itself the Kennel because they have a lot of dogs. So my question for you is, do you think this team has enough dogs? And when you built this team, was that what you were looking for?
You don't want to get me going down the road on talking about dogs. I'm going to leave that one alone, okay? Unless I get a remember the bowl that we had for the 2006 championship? Everybody put 15 strong cards in there. Unless I see a dog food bowl in front of everybody's locker here, I don't think we'll have a kennel in that locker, with their name engraved on it. So I think we all know what Bam's talking about, and what he's talking about is there's this mentality. I can remember, when a player would feel absolutely really respected if a writer would call this guy's a complete player. Then it got to the point where they said, this guy's a player. Everybody knew what that meant, or this guy's that. You can describe it. And so players take great pride in how hard they play, their approach to the game. They're very physical. They're very aggressive. If that's what Bam's talking about, that we got a bunch of DAWGs, then fine. I want to see it every now and then, out on the court. But defensively, we had to improve this year, and I think we have. And we have 4 or 5 or 6 guys who can really defend. I don't care how big they are, they can really defend. So that whole kennel, if it turns into something that, has something else in it, then I might have to let Bam know about that.
All right, Coach, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. You got it. See you all.